Mitchell Robinson's out to start the season for the Knicks. Is that going to give New York a bit of trouble this season? Plus, we're going to talk about what we want from the NBA this season, from the media, from the league, from the officiating, some hopes and dreams for the 2024-25 season. Plus, we'll preview the Southwest Division and whether or not the Dallas Mavericks can return to the NBA Finals. All that and more on Locked On NBA.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On NBA, your daily source for all things NBA from the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for joining us and making us part of your day. Appreciate you guys being with us Monday through Friday with all of our great hosts. Glad to have you along for the ride as we get closer and closer to the start of training camp. On Thursday, the Denver Nuggets and Boston Celtics will begin their seasons with Media Day, then start training camp before they head overseas. And then next Monday, David Ramil and I, who's joining me today, will be recapping Media Day as the NBA season officially gets underway. We are there for the start of the 24-25 season. Today's show is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. My name's Matt Moore. I'm the senior NBA writer for the Action Network. I'm joined, as I said, by David Ramil. He's co-host of Locked On Heat. You can catch me over at Locked On Nuggets. Today's show, we're going to preview the Southwest Division and how, it's a death gauntlet of doom. It's just pain and misery every game with all of these teams being so good and so tough and just a real pain to play. We'll talk about who we think is going to win, who's going to lose in that division, and we'll talk about who we think is going to be frisky in this upcoming season. We're also going to talk a little bit about what we want from this NBA season. It's time to get some excitement up. So we're going to talk about what we're hopeful for, what we want to see from the league in 24-25. But we start today with a little bit of news as Yoram Weitzman from Fox Sports reports that Mitchell Robinson will not be available for the start of the regular season for the New York Knicks. Robinson underwent surgery on his left ankle in May to address a stress injury after having a procedure on the same ankle back in December. His recovery is ongoing, and both Weitzman and Ian Begley of SMY TV suggest that the Knicks and Robinson are targeting a return in, quote, December or January. So that's not just like, hey, he's going to miss the first few games. He's going to be out through the in-season tournament and not until the beginning of the year. Oftentimes, with long-term injuries like this returning from surgery, you've got the concern of conditioning on top of everything else. So they're going to wait and then bring him back. David, I have a lot of concerns for the Knicks in light of this news. What was your reaction to the news that Robinson won't be available for the start of the season?
Yeah, definitely a tough blow to start off there. You already lose Isaiah Hartenstein in free agency to Oklahoma City. Now you're down with Mitchell missing a significant amount of time. And it's a great point. It's not just a couple of games and you can welcome him back sometime in November. No. You're missing months of activity. You're missing the tournament. You're missing crucial games. And in the Eastern Conference, that's a much more competitive field than it was last season. I think it's really a tough loss for the New York Knicks. On top of that, you've got Julius Randle, whose own return to action might be delayed somewhat. And I think it was reported also that his return from injury is going to be taking a little bit longer, and he might miss some time at the start of the season as well, although not expected to miss as long a time as Robinson. So it's a tough break. They don't really have a center on that roster, and certainly not one that can fill in as admirably as either Hartenstein or Randall or anybody else. So I know that a lot of Knicks fans had kind of hoped that maybe Tibbs might be willing to try Julius Randle at the center position. It might still be an option once he does eventually return from injury. But I still think it's a big blow to their ability to kind of establish a rhythm early on and get any kind of consistency as they near the All-Star break.
Yeah, so we're down to, if you're not going to start Julius Randle at the 5, the Knicks are down to Precious Achiuwa and Jericho Sims. Those are the options now for center after Hartenstein left in free agency for the Oklahoma City Thunder. For me, a lot of this is about, it's endemic to who the Knicks are. Like, how do the Knicks win? The Knicks were actually bottom 15 in half-court offense last season. They score by getting out in transition, and especially they score by getting second chance points. That's where they dominate, is on offensive glass. They are a hustle junkie machine. Like, those guys, that's where they win those games, is by absolutely destroying you on the boards. Without Hartenstein and now without Mitchell Robinson, even if Randall plays, Randall's a good rebounder, but wingspan has always been kind of a knock on him. Good rebounder, but he's going to struggle versus all these teams that have any sort of size on him. Josh Hart, as maniacal as he is in crashing the glass, can't compensate that much. Plus, it's hard to get Hart into the rotation after adding Mikal Bridges next to OG Anunoby and Dante DiVincenzo alongside Jalen Brunson. You can't run Josh Hart at 5. That's probably not a good idea, though I'm sure he would somehow manage to get 8 rebounds a game. So I have just real concerns for what this means for their makeup. Robinson was really good defensively the first half of last year before he got hurt. Right. He was a blocks machine. He's a guy that puts up all the box score stats. The impact stuff was better with Hartenstein, but that's obviously off the table to begin with. And so for a team that isn't necessarily explosive offensively, they have a lot of shooting, and that makes up for a lot. But without a lot of kind of core mechanics, like I wonder, all right, you want to run pick and roll with Jalen Brunson, right? Like that's what you want to do, is you want to run a lot of Jalen Brunson pick and roll. Who's screening for him? Is Julius Randle a screener to really be that guy night in and night out? That's a lot of wear and tear on Julius, who tends to get banged up anyway. And for a team with notorious injury issues because their coach likes to play them 7,000 minutes every single game, I just think that there's a lot of reasons to actually be like, hey, Mitchell Robinson's not a household name, but this could wind up being pretty impactful for a Knicks team with serious hopes of making the conference finals and challenging the Celtics.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Like there's a connectivity here when you take away one significant piece. It's all very, very connected and linked, and you take away that piece in Robinson, while not on the surface maybe the most impactful player, but still valuable, and he provides something that's desperately needed in terms of size, rebounding, and his defensive acumen. And then you take him out, and you're kind of shifting the amount of minutes everybody has to play. You have to play up a position, whether it's Anunoby or Hart or Randall once he does come back. And all of a sudden you're forcing them to take on bigger challenges and facing tougher, bigger players. That's going to have a cumulative effect, more wear and tear throughout the season. And that's not something the Knicks team needs. They're trying to avoid that. You saw what happened at the end of last season when they probably had a good chance of knocking out the Indiana Pacers had they not broken down, and somewhat expectedly, given how Tibbs manages minutes and things of that sort. So now you've got the increase in minutes. You've got the fact that everybody has to play up in a position and probably guard bigger players that they'd like to and fill in for Robinson until he does come back. It's not a great situation there. It's a bummer because already the season hasn't even started and there's kind of a cloud hanging over it. I don't know. I'd still say that they're a playoff team. I don't think they're likely to miss the playoffs or anything like that, but I think it will be something that keeps them out of maybe being the top 4 seed in the Eastern Conference. And that's something they were certainly vying for.
Yeah, and I think seeding is a real problem because it can wind up sliding down there. If you want proof of that, just look at who the Knicks played last year. Sixers were on track for a top 3 seed in a much easier path, and they wound up getting the Knicks in the first round, and that was all for their season. We'll see how this works out, and if the Knicks can make a move, whether that's trading for Walker Kessler or pulling something else out of another rabbit out of their hat. We'll keep your eyes on that here on Locked On NBA. Up next, we'll talk about what we want from this NBA season, whether it's from the media side, from the game side, whether just things that we're hopeful for. We're going to talk about what we want to see from the NBA this season up next here on Locked On NBA. Today's show is brought to you by Game Time. The absolute best way for you to get tickets is Game Time. They've got a new feature called Game Time Picks that make getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. It filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. I use Game Time all the time. It's especially useful whenever you just want to kind of pop down and see a game or a show. One of the cool things that you can do if you're like me and you want to save a little bit of dough, if you're going to a baseball game, wait till the first inning and you can still get tickets on Game Time right through that first inning at a big discount. You can catch the same thing for hockey during the first period, basketball first quarter. All those make it really easy for you to get the tickets you want at the prices that you want. You can turn on the all-in pricing, and that's going to tell you everything, all the fees, everything associated with those tickets, so nothing's going to surprise you when you go to check out. They've got a lowest price guarantee. Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Download the Game Time app today. Create an account and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it, David?
It's game time.
We'll be right back.
Right back
on Locked On NBA. We botched the alley-oop there, David. We just clanged it off the rim. Back here on Locked On NBA. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate you guys being with us here on Tuesday. So I thought this would be a good topic. We are a week out from training camp. We're going to start having news every single day. We've made it, David. We got through the absolute one of the quietest off seasons I can remember. Like we got everything was done in free agency in 2 weeks, and then it's just been crickets. It makes you long for the days of Damian Lillard, Miami Heat rumors.
Golden years.
But I did want to go ahead, with the season right around the corner, I want to kind of talk about like what we're hoping to see from the league this season. Like, what are things that we want to see from the NBA? I've got my own list, but I wanted you to go first. What's something that you'd like to see from the NBA this season?
I want to see a kind of remembrance that last year's in-season tournament was actually kind of fun. And, I think so much of it was everybody kind of trashing the tournament and like, oh, the courts suck, the jerseys suck, whatever. Like there was a lot of discourse that I don't understand what the tournament's about. But I found myself as the tournament progressed really appreciating these games and seeing the players kind of treat them with more of a playoff-like atmosphere and an attitude where they really wanted to win. It got competitive, like whether it was manufactured or not, doesn't matter. At some point, these games took on a bigger life than their own, and they wound up being fun as heck. So I want everybody to kind of remember that without at the same time the NBA having to put a very polished PR campaign to kind of sell us on the in-season tournament. Just kind of remind us the games are great. They're going to be fun. They're going to be exciting. And I think the fans should remember that. So I don't know if that's necessarily on the league or on us as media members or as just on everybody in general, like fandom, just kind of recollecting the fact that this was actually a really fun experience. But that's what I'd like to see. One of the things anyway.
Yeah, the new courts have been leaked, and I really like the new court concepts. There's a lot more circles on the court is how I can best describe it, and it actually looks really good. I think that'll help with some of this. Some of the courts are still going to be like gray, and those are going to be kind of dull. But I do generally like the feel of those games. It was cool to be at them last year, being in the building for those. There was a little bit more of excitement, and like the games were better. This is like the last missing ingredient. I really think the league has pivoted to there's more parity, so more teams feel like their team can win the title. There's a great crop of superstars at the very, very top. We've got the aging kind of crop with LeBron and Steph and KD, but there's also like a great crop of current players that are generational or borderline generational. There's a new crop coming up with Victor Wembanyama. You've got Luka Doncic kind of coming into his prime. You've got Cooper Flag coming in the league next year. All these things are really working out. And so there's a good opportunity here. I think with the in-season tournament, the last key is like, you just need the games to be good. And so like that to me is part of it is like the in-season tournament games last year, if you watch them, they were good. And I want more good games. That's what I care about most is I want good games. I will start here and I want to pursue those good games. And what I want is for them to keep up how they officiated the back half of the season. The league was very weird about this last year, being like, no, we didn't say anything. We didn't. Really?
No point of emphasis. What are you talking about? Yeah.
Free throws are down? Really? That's weird. Huh. It's maddening because David Stern would have been like, yes, I changed the rules. I'll do it again. Like, that's what I want to see is like, is the Adam Silver being like, yes, scoring was out of control. We had 2 70-point games. Yes, I changed the rules. I want them to keep that up. I want them to keep that same energy. A couple seasons ago, we had the same thing where they changed the points of emphasis and we had fewer fouls. I understand that this is difficult because the players whine so much at the officials, but I need them to hold the line. I need you to be strong. I am a parent. I know how it is when someone is complaining at you nonstop, but you got to hold your ground. And I don't want to see a return to a million free throws. The popularity of the Olympics this summer and how much everyone was talking about it, how, this is really good basketball, should be proof enough that this is what fans want. No one outside of the 15 best players in the NBA want the game officiated the way that it was. Nobody wants it. The teams don't want it. I don't think. The teams don't want it. The fans definitely don't want it. The media doesn't want it. The TV partners don't want it. Who wants more free throws on television? Now, stoppages are good. Add more timeouts. That's fine. But for the love of God, please keep the officiating the way it was at the back half of last season. What's next on your list, David?
Actually, you've mentioned, and I've got a couple of things. I'm going to tie them together here. So this is number 2 and 3 on my list because you mentioned the bumper crop of young stars, and that's kind of what I'm like curious about, just to see who's the next player that emerges. For me, last season, I know it's just kind of not really a star on the rise last year, but he was just. It felt like last season belonged to Tyrese Halliburton, and it was just the buildup of the offense, seeing that Indiana Pacers team play at such a high level, watching him be the engine, the connecting piece that just makes everything go on this really high octane offense, and then culminating with All-Star game in Indianapolis and seeing everything work out through the in-season tournament and the playoffs and everything else. He was the star of last season to me in a lot of respects. And I'm curious to see who emerges on that level this year. We've talked a lot on the show about who's the face of the franchise or the league moving forward. There's got to be a young player who's going to step out. I don't know who it is. There's a few names out there, certainly a lot of capable people who can carry that torch a little bit, but I'm curious to see who it is that steps up. But at the same time, you mentioned those young stars, and you already threw it in there. You already mentioned Cooper Flag in there. I was so done with the whole Victor Wembanyama experience, as great as he was. I don't want to hear about everybody, failing for Flag or whatever they're going to call this tanking approach. Just let the kid be. If the team's going to suck, they're going to suck. And who knows whether or not this kid's going to turn out or pan out at the NBA level. But we were just drowned for the last 2 seasons of everybody's tanking for Wembanyama. And then Wembanyama comes in as a rookie. It's like, oh, look at Victor Wembanyama breathe somewhere in the general direction of another player. Fantastic. A future Hall of Famer. Like, it kind of, to me, and I know I sound cranky curmudgeonly, it just kind of ruined the whole experience of being able to appreciate a guy that great. So those are my 2 and 3 because I think they're connected somewhat.
Okay, tune in next week as I give you my rundown of the best things about Cooper Flag, because I am all in on Cooper.
I know
Flag.
you are. I know
I'm
you
all
are.
in.
You are.
There's other guys in the draft too. Ace Bailey, also very good. Couple
sure.
other guys.
No one's mentioning them. No one's mentioning
It's true.
them.
No one's talking about them. My next one. So I have been captain. The player should play more. I've been like very much on this. Load management bugged me. It bothers me that people pay hard-earned money. Like, I've gone to games and ran into fans that would recognize me and be like, it's not often, let's be clear. It's like very rare, but been doing this a while. And so they'd be like, yeah, we drove in from, one group was like, we drove in from Oklahoma City to see Steph Curry. We're huge Warriors fans. Yeah, he didn't play that night. And it's just like, I get it. I am understanding. It drove me a little bit crazy when it got so extreme, and it ruins the games because these games just become sloppy. Once the star players are out, the whole vibe of that game changes for both teams. The other side kind of lets down a little bit. The other time's a little bit more amped up. It's a little bit more all over the place because you're playing different. It's just like, it's not the best product. However, like last season was really instructive for me. And like, I can admit when I don't think I was completely wrong. I think I was a little wrong because what we got the other last season was the other way, where Tyrese Halliburton was injured and playing because he wanted to get to 66 games. And we had a lot of players, honestly, were playing through injury, and you don't want to see that. Like, I think that there's a reasonable limit here to be able, the 66 is going to be the rule for a little bit, or 65 games is going to be the rule for a little bit. Yeah. But I'm hopeful that they get that amended because I don't think anybody really loves the setup of that rule. There's got to be an adjustment that can be made there. But as far as the load management goes, have guys, slot in a certain amount of games for a guy to be able to sit, keep him healthy, and don't make it to where guys are playing all the way through for these kind of things. Like, there's got to be and that some of that's on the players because the players make that call if they're like, no, I don't care. I want to, like, this bonus is too much. I'm playing. I'm going to get the 65 games. That's their decision, but I'm hopeful that the players will make those decisions. It's a balance. I think there's got to be a healthy balance between load management and playing through injury. There's got to be like a healthy balance there, and it's difficult, but I want to see more of that this season because I hate to see it when guys are trying to play through injury and risking them being banged up in the playoffs.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's such a difficult balance, though, and I don't know that there's any one solution or anything like that. And I think it's just going to be a problem that's going to exist through perpetuity. It's just a matter of finding a way to still get out on the court without pushing yourself too much. It's a tough place to be in because, as a player, you want to play, but at the same time, you want to be guarding your health and you want to preserve your career a little bit. And you also want to be available for the playoffs where it ultimately matters most. So we'll see how it goes. For somebody who covers the team like the Heat that is constantly injured, it's again, finding that balance is not very easy, but I like to see the rest of the league achieve it a lot better than Miami has.
I like the segment. I actually might slide this one back here in a few weeks as we get through preseason. If we're not slammed with news, I'd like to talk more about this with you because I think there's more stuff to discuss. This was fun, though. On the other side, we're going to preview the Southwest Division as we continue our division previews here on the Tuesday episode of Locked On NBA. We'll talk about the Southwest Division. Can the Dallas Mavericks return to the finals? Are the Memphis Grizzlies back? Are the Spurs going to surprise with Victor Wembanyama? And more. We'll talk about that up next here on Locked On NBA. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Mixed results for me this weekend, betting NFL. I'm recording this on Monday afternoon, and how can I put this? I need the Jags like I need air for my lungs. I need them very badly for a parlay to ensure a winning weekend. Otherwise, it's going to be a rough one for your boy. When you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. I did this with the Broncos. I bet the Buccaneers, and then immediately the Broncos went up 14-0. So I looked up some stats on how often do road dogs cover when they're up 14-0 after the first. And it was like, oh, yeah, no, they cover by 10 points or more. So I started playing alternate lines, and I managed to go ahead and wipe out that terrible Buccaneers bet. Whew. You can get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet at FanDuel. That's FanDuel.com. We'll be right back on Locked On NBA. Final segment here on Locked On NBA. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate you guys being with us here on a Tuesday. Hope your week's going well. Catch all of our great hosts throughout the week. Jake Massa and John Corrales got you covered tomorrow. All right. So, David, we're going to do the Southwest Division. And we started in our pre-show. You were like, this division's tough. And it's brutal. Like, this division is just absolutely brutal. I think it's very unlikely. But I will say none of these teams, if you're like, this team made the playoffs, none of them would surprise me. And that is pretty crazy. There's not room for all five, but boy, are these teams really good. So let's start at the top as we always do. Who do you think is going to win this division?
I don't know. I really don't. Like, I was just looking at these rosters.
Dynamite stuff, David. You don't know. All right. Up next on Locked On NBA.
I mean, look, you've got Memphis, they're welcoming back John Morant. They're going to be re-energized. It's going to be a different team, different vibe. They've got as good a chance as anybody. You got the New Orleans Pelicans. They acquired DeJounte Murray. They look like they're retooled. They've got some great wings on that team. They've got a really nice cast. It's just a fun team to watch. They're everybody's kind of darling sleeper, and I think for a good reason. At the same time, they've been really good over the last couple seasons, and Zion Williamson seems like he's finally hit his peak. So this could be the team that certainly wins the division, but I'm having a hard time picking against Luka Doncic and the Dallas Mavericks. And maybe it's impossible for them to capture lightning in a bottle twice. But, Kyrie Irving's getting a little older, but he's still a very decent player. He's still a very, very good player. And Doncic is, again, entering his prime. They get back Spencer Dinwiddie in a roster there. They made some changes over the offseason. They've got PJ Washington there now after last year, and he was really good in the playoffs too. So, I mean, it just seems like a really well put together roster. I cannot argue against the Mavericks repeating as division champs.
I have the Pelicans really high in my projections. They're like tied with Dallas, not tied. They're like one or two back. My Memphis projection is just a shot at it. Like, it's a dart at a board. That's it. Because most folks are going to go one of two ways. They're either going to be like, well, they're good, but will they really be that good? Which ignores how good they were 2 years ago and 3 years ago. And the other side is going to go, they'll be right back to where they were 2 years ago and 3 years ago with an even better bench. I will just say that I think chemistry changes over time. It's been 2 years since they were really competitive, and chemistry changes and the makeup of the team changes. And it's I like the coach and I like the superstar. I think that Ja is going to have a bounce back season. I love Desmond Bane. Jaren Jackson's got a lot better offensively. I don't love the Walker Kessler fit, but I just I'm like, he's going to screen well, get a lot of rebounds, and score some points. Like, even if he is at the bottom of his floor, it's still better than most of the other rookies and better than most starting centers. And so there's a pretty good baseline there for them to be good. I just don't know how to really get them. I am going with the Dallas Mavericks here. And the reason is if the Pelicans would just trade Brandon Ingram, and it's not because Brandon Ingram sucks, it's that I don't like Brandon Ingram's fit, and I think that he takes up too much oxygen on this team. If they traded Brandon Ingram, I would be all in on the Pelicans, but they haven't, and they're not, and they have no center. Like Yves Messi, it could be starting at center, and that concerns me. I'm going with the Mavericks. All the metrics I have say that, like, I wanted to fade Dallas to be like, oh, they made the conference finals they made the finals last year. I thought that was fluky. They'll probably take a step back. And then, like, I look at it, when Luka and Derek Lively play, they won at like a 55 win pace. It's that simple. Like, when Lively and Luka were able to play together, they won a ton of games. There's better spacing around them. Now, you lose some of the identity that they built at the end of the season with losing Derrick Jones Jr. Like, they're not going to be, I don't think, as stout defensively as they were last year. But they're adding so much offensively with Klay Thompson. Najee Marshall's a good defender. I mean, he's not as gritty as Derrick Jones Jr. They're adding enough here for them to be able to get it done. And so I think that they will wind up winning 55 plus games, and I'll take them to win the division. This one's actually like really tough. Well, maybe it's not. Who's finishing last in this division?
I still think it's the Spurs. I just don't think that they can make that much of a leap. I know Victor, again, he's going to take another leap. The roster is going to feel a lot more consistent. They added some nice veterans in Chris Paul and Harrison Barnes. It just feels like they're going to be a team that's going to improve. And you know that all they need is a little bit of hope. And with Greg Popovich's coaching and Wembanyama's talent, obviously, I think there's a very good chance that they can, I guess, I don't know, flirt with 500 for most of the season. But I think they'll fall short ultimately of that. And unless they make a huge midseason trade, which there's already been rumors for acquiring X superstar or something along those lines, who knows if it's likely to happen. But I have to pick San Antonio. I have a hard time. I mean, I know I like Houston. I like Houston and their ability to, continue to grow and develop. They were 41-41 last year. That's pretty good. In the East, they would have been, certainly they would have been a 7th seed in the Eastern Conference playoff. So I mean, that's just a different animal altogether out in the West. I have a hard time picking against Houston taking a step back. So I think San Antonio, although they'll improve, they won't improve enough not to escape the bottom of the division.
Right next to your, I don't know, answer for who's going to win the division. Here's another thriller, which my answer is like whoever's going to be injured. Like, that's what's going to decide this. Is one team's going to wind up getting banged up, whether it's the Pelicans with Zion or the Grizzlies once again fall into injury hell, or if the Rockets were to lose Şengün, or if the Spurs, Chris Paul, really up there in age, if they catch a bug, they don't have the depth in order to be able to sustain it. I'll say the Spurs as well. It's the issue I have is I don't know how to project Wembanyama. I really don't. Like, how much, when you're trying to build some sort of model for Victor Wembanyama, how do you project how many more wins he's going to add? Like, dunksandthrees.com, which is my favorite stats website, has him responsible for an estimated 10 wins last season. That his box score impact was worth 10 wins last season. In his rookie season, when he didn't know what he was doing, when they had him play without a point guard at power forward half the year. Like, how much does that improve? 50%? Is he worth 15 now? Is that 5 wins more? Is it 10 wins more? Like, how do you figure out how much Victor Wembanyama's internal improvement, his natural progression as a second-year player, how much does that improve them? I don't know. Having 2 actual NBA veteran players in Harrison Barnes and Chris Paul, how much does that help just stabilizing that group of them knowing where to be on the floor? It's really hard to project, but look, I know the defense is going to be good under Udoka. I could see the Rockets starting off behind and then Jalen Green getting benched. Jalen Green, frequent topic on this show. And then Reed Shepherd taking over as the 2-guard spot, and then them or Amen Thompson, and them kind of lifting up. But I will go with the San Antonio Spurs.
Do you think Wembanyama might suffer from fatigue due to the Olympic tournament? I mean, I know he's young and everything else like that, and you kind of tend to disregard that. But I mean, it was a long NBA season for him. He is kind of underweight. Does he suffer some kind of fatigue? I mean, again, knock on wood, perhaps an injury at some point?
I don't think it's fatigue so much as it is the shot just may not go anywhere.
Right.
You know, because like that's like the internal improvement point is if you look at his shooting, still not a good jump shooter. He's still all over the place. And if you watch him, that makes sense. But if he tightens that up, yikes. Just yikes all over for the rest of the league. All right. This is a tough one in this division because we're basically like they're all good. Who's the frisky team? Who's like the really dangerous team in this division outside of we like the Mavericks at the top and the Spurs at the bottom? Who's the frisky one?
I think you kind of have to make it the Rockets. I mean, they're a good team. They were good, surprisingly good last year. They made a heck of an improvement. And you mentioned Udoka already. You mentioned that roster. Like there's a lot of well-balanced pieces on there. And I think they have the potential to be that team that you don't want to face, especially if you're competing towards the end of the season, maybe for one of those upper two spots in the division, or you're trying to get a couple wins here and there. They definitely feel like total spoiler vibe. And I know that may not, we might not see that necessarily, but that's kind of how they feel like to me. They're good enough to win a lot of games. They might not be good enough to be viewed as the best team in this division, but they'll be really competitive. They'll play hard. They're deeper than they were last year. They'll be better. Barring injury, I think they're going to be a darn good team. And that being the case, I think they're going to win a lot more games. Well, maybe not a lot more games than they did last year, and enough games to be just a team that you don't want to really face.
I'm going to go with the New Orleans Pelicans. They're my pick.
They're too good to be frisky. They're too good to be frisky.
No, because like I think the win total is like down at like 45.5. Like they're projected to basically be like a play-in tournament team. And this team was like for a long period of time was basically projected to finish like top 4 or top 5 and then slid off. DeJounte Murray was objectively bad and negative for the Hawks last year. And that doesn't make any sense to me. So I am banking on the tried and true don't play with Trae Young paradigm and for him to have a bounce back season. I don't think that's Trae's fault. I don't think that's DeJounte's fault. Like Trae's talked about this, about how like they just didn't work together. They're good friends. Right. They get along great, but they couldn't figure it out on the court. Having a real point guard who can shoot and theoretically defend. He was awful defensively last year, but theoretically, if he can defend next to Zion is really like having the option of going to a lineup with DeJounte Murray, Jose Alvarado, Trey Murphy, and Herb Jones. That to me, I get really excited. The basketball nerd in me gets really excited about that 4-man group that is pesky and annoying and fast and athletic and defends like nothing else. And then you throw in Zion or insert center or forward here, and you can make it work. I'm really excited about that combination. You'll notice again, there's no Brandon Ingram in that lineup. And I'm not trying to be just like an outright hater on Brandon Ingram. I just don't think he fits here. I think there's a lot of teams he can go to and be the guy and be very successful and put up a lot of numbers. I just don't like him on the fit with this team with what they're capable of. If the roster was better built around Brandon Ingram than Zion Williamson, I'd be like, you should probably move on from Zion. But it's not. If you put 4 capable guards who can shoot, or wings, guard/wings, next to Zion Williamson and give him the ball as point forward, that's going to work. It's going to absolutely wreck teams. This team has overperformed defensively. They've been good. That's the one. I have a lot of questions about Willie Green's offensive approach, but defensively, that guy's done work. This team has been way better than you think defensively the last couple of years, given their personnel. I think there's a high upside. I think they can win enough games to be in competition for the division. I think they can, if they can put it together and make the right moves, they could make a deep run in the playoffs. I really believe that, but they got to make the right moves. So I'll say that they're the frisky team. Okay, we're through the Southwest Division. Next week, we'll preview another one. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate you guys being with us. Make sure to keep it here all week long as we get you set for NBA Media Days and into preseason and then the regular season. You are just 30 days away from the start of 28 days. 28 days as you're listening to this from the start of the NBA season. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you guys again next time on Locked On NBA.